Hello and welcome to the AdTech Heroes podcast. In today's episode, we are going to talk about retaining talent, and I'm delighted to be joined by Katie Grosvenor. Katie is based in the UK and is a Chief Client Engagement and Growth Officer at GroupM. Hi Katie, how's it going?
Hello, I am really well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me today and to talk about a topic I'm particularly passionate about. I really appreciate it.
I think it's important for a lot of people, right? Whatever organization you're in, at the company level as well as the individual level, understanding talent, retaining talent, is front of mind, right?
Absolutely.
Before we kickstart into the topic, it'd be great to understand a little bit about your career and what's got you to where we are today.
So, a long time ago, after I left uni, I kind of did a whole load of different jobs, right, just to start making money and figure out what I wanted to do, and really random, could have been a call centre and sports centre, all of those things. And I ended up working for Cambridge University in their city planning department. And I knew that absolutely that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. Ever since I was a teenager, I'd want to work in TV and film. So I knew city planning, as interesting as it is, wasn't going to be for me in the long term. Like so many people, though, I didn't have a clue how to get into it. I didn't have any connections. I just knew it was something what I wanted to do. So I called a recruiter. I came down to London to meet her. This is you can tell this is a long time ago. But we had a chat and she was like, I think you'd be great at MediaCom. She gave me a fiver, put me in a cab, and I ended up at MediaCom. And it was brilliant. I got a job as a marketing assistant working for Karen Blackett. And then from there, I was just really lucky. I was given lots of chances and lots of ways to progress my career. At first in marketing and new business, both at global and local roles. But I think I got to a point where I realised I needed to stretch myself a bit and learn some new things. And, the ethos at then called MediaCom, is very much around people development. And I was given the opportunity to go and be the Global Operations Director on Mars. So actually working with the client and getting under the skin of the client. And that experience was really insightful. Mars are a wonderful client and they are excellent marketeers. And they just gave me insight into a much broader conversation that was being had. They were kind of ahead of the game in the brand suitability area, and it gave me kind of a perspective of our position of responsibility within society. So that led me to Integral Ad Science, and I pulled out the very comfortable rug from underneath myself, I have to admit, and took on the role of head of strategy, then became head of Northern Europe at Integral. And I am forever grateful for Paul Nassay, who took a punt on me, basically. Having never worked in sales or never worked in technology, he took a chance. And again, that was super insightful for me because I kind of went there to try and understand or learn a bit more in terms of my technical skills. But in the time that I was there, we went from founder-led to PE-owned to IPOing in about 4.5 years. So implementing those changes that come with that at a local level, the learnings are just absolutely huge. So kind of a couple of different steps going and filling some gaps to then back in last year, beginning of last year, I was got the opportunity to come back and rejoin the GroupM family doing this role. And I felt like it would bring together lots of the things that I'd learned over that 20-year period and bring all of those elements together in what I think is a brilliant job. I love my job. And even in that year, there's been so much change here at GroupM. But that's what's exciting, and that's what makes the industry exciting, that kind of constant change.
And did you find that shift from agency side to tech side quite hard? And did it take a bit of time to get used to, having possibly sales targets, talking to different people,
Absolutely. I felt like a fish out of water for a while. A new language, a new way of working, like you say, those weekly sales targets, just getting my head around whole new way of being, right? And I have to admit, for those first sort of 3 or 4 months, I was like, oh my God, like what I was really comfortable. What have I done? But like I say, I mean, when I look back at that experience, what I got from it was phenomenal. So that kind of uncomfortable first few months were worth it.
And you mentioned comfort there. Is that something we all need to do in our industry or in our careers, is to step out of that comfort zone and try something new? And do you know why there could be so many reasons why people don't do it?
Well, I think you have to be prepared to be a bit vulnerable, right? We get into roles where we're really comfortable with what we're doing. Everybody wants to do a good job. So if you get into a position that you're really nailing your role and you work for a company that you love, and actually you're not leaving the company because you're not having a good time at the company, it's understandable why people would want to stay in that. I think for me, it was really important that I scared myself a bit. I knew I sort of had to go from that experience, and bearing in mind, I'd been at Mediacom 13 years. I'd essentially sort of grown up there. It was a bit like a rite of passage of like leaving home for me. You get to that point, you're sort of 17, 18, you're like, well, I've got to step out now to go and experience this. So, it was important for me personally to go and do that.
Mm-hmm. So you joined the industry, I suppose, not in the quote unquote traditional route, which could be, doing a marketing degree, then going into an internship or apprenticeship, and then kind of working your way up. Is that safe to say?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did do a degree, but it was an arts degree, and it didn't give me the foundations, I think, of what you would get if it was something that you specifically studied, or, if you had those connections and had learned about the industry that way. I very much came into it because, I loved telly. I loved adverts. And the feeling that it gave me made me think this would be a really cool thing to go and be part of.
Definitely. I think that's a good point. It's the tangible side of it, right? We see the everyday adverts, whether it's the creativity element to it, or it's the back end, or the kind of personal values that are probably you can associate with a brand, for example. So I think it's the tangible stuff we look at when we're kind of that age, and then we want to see how we can enter that market or into that industry as a career. But in terms of like your day-to-day now, what does that look like?
Well, like I said, I love my job because it's so broad. So we have lots going on at GroupM, and I think in the UK we've been very much a hub of innovation. So lots of the parts of our business have been sort of created by a small group of people in a meeting room with ideas that we've then been able to scale internationally. So we've kind of got that within our London HQ, that sort of entrepreneurial kind of excitement going on. And because the role is across marketing, it's across comms, it's across business development, I work with our product teams and our commercial teams. Actually, there's probably not a day-to-day. And I think probably actually quite a lot of people would say the same thing, that when someone asks you that, particularly in an interview, they say, what will my day-to-day look like? And you go, well, actually, probably not the same every day. And again, it's that breadth that makes our industry really exciting to be part of.
Definitely. In your opinion, why do you think people enter our industry?
I think it's a really broad sector. And like you say, you kind of get that tangible feel, don't you, from when you see an advert on the telly, and it kind of evokes an emotion. I did join because I wanted to make television ads. Ever since I saw The Secret Lemonade Drinker, it was my favourite advert of all time. But, increasingly since I've joined, there's been so much change, and there is so much opportunity for creativity in every discipline, whether that's creative, whether that's execution, buying, data. And what that means is actually whatever you excel in as a person, there's probably a role for you in advertising, which is really lovely. I think specifically with digital marketing, what's exciting, again, I mean, the pace of which it evolves is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's unstoppable. And the reach that you have to impact people is so extensive. And I think when we look at last year, whilst we did see less growth than we had kind of off the boom of 2021, a lot of that growth was in digital and digital extensions. So, you know, it's a really exciting part of our business.
And what possible routes do you see potential candidates in entering our industry? Talk me through that.
So I think, I think advertising has always seemed like an attractive industry, but I think trust has declined somewhat. And so, you know, is it still as attractive as it was? I think that's possibly debatable. It certainly was for me, but it wasn't very clear because I hadn't been educated around how to get into it, because I didn't know anyone. I didn't even really know whether it was achievable. And there was a study by, if you look at the kind of creative industry and in its totality, there was a study by the BFI recently with Epic, a recruitment app. And actually only 6% of the people who answered that survey said they believed that an industry and a career in the screen industry was achievable for them. And I think that's kind of really sad. In terms of routes, you know, over the past few years, the industry and agencies have been doing a lot to widen the access so that people don't necessarily have to come through a traditional route, through a degree, through a university degree. And I think a lot has changed over the past 20 years, certainly since I've been in it, and we are a long way away from the days of Mad Men, which I'm very grateful for. But what we've tried to do is make it we've tried to make it more accessible, because what we actually know is if we have a team of people who are representative of the UK population, we will create the best work for our clients, and we'll also make it a more interesting place to work because it's naturally more inspiring. Couple of the things that we've started to do a couple of years ago, we created the Visible Start programme, which was for returners to work, for women 45 years and over, returning to work after a career break and looking for their first career step into the industry. It's an amazing programme. One of my friends signed up to it last year. She's been a teaching assistant for a very long time. And, you know, she kind of hadn't put together her CV in many years. And what the programme does, and it was set up in partnership with the Uninvisibility team and the Brixton Finishing School team, is in part focused on the digital skill areas, because a lot of the gaps or significant underrepresentation in digital is women of over 45. But the programme does all sorts of training, confidence building, personal branding, transferable skills, all the way through to those digital skills. And actually, what we've tried to do and what we've done is hire from cohort 1, and we're currently going through cohort 2. The other route that we have long kind of had standing in the group is apprenticeships. So I think Essence MediaCom was one of the first agencies to start an apprenticeship scheme. All of our agencies doing it. It's a big part of our strategy. Specifically here at GroupM, we've hired 153 apprentices through either our Digital Academy, our Edge programme or our Gateway programme. And they are talent that is representative of kind of the London predominantly population. I think one thing that we need to do, sorry, this is a long answer. One thing that we need to do, and it's specifically on my mind because I've come out of a conversation about this morning, we need to work closely with the government and local councils and how we are getting into schools, how we're raising the profile of the industry in schools. I know for me, the media studies A-level 20 plus years ago was really top line, and actually, like I said, didn't give me any foundations for actually working in the industry. But we need to kind of raise the profile in schools. And you'll probably have seen that Josh Krzyzewski, who's our relatively new UK and EMEA CEO, was also nominated to be the president of the IPA this year, which is wonderful. And very much part of his People First agenda is how we create those routes to attract a wider talent base.
I think that's really important. We want to attract talent from different backgrounds and, like I said, different ages, different age groups and demographics. But ultimately, do they know that this industry exists? Do they know that there are jobs that match their skill set, like you mentioned? Is it as simple as just going to a university and putting a stall there and talking to grads, or is it a lot more complex than that, would you say?
Well, I think being and talking to grads in universities is important, but I actually think it's before that. In the secondary school level, there's a brilliant foundation called the Founders for Schools, who have people sign up and then they go into schools and they talk about their careers. I know lots of people who have done that, and actually it's careers that people didn't know existed. So I think it's about getting in there and making it interesting and making people realise why it's so interesting.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good point. And a lot of us now work from home a good portion of the week, and we all live in different parts of the UK. It just means we can possibly take a little bit of time out of our diaries to go into our local school or our old secondary schools and spend that time. But then, like you said, it comes to the government, right? And maybe pushing each school in each local area to start bringing in ex students in. So I think, yeah, definitely that's important.
And it's super difficult, isn't it? Because of the underfunding of schools.
Yeah.
So, to layer this on as well as trying to get it right in terms of all of the other, important elements of education. So I understand that, but I do think given the creative sector puts so much towards the UK economy, it's kind of one of those things that it's a simply must do.
Yeah. And we always think of hiring talent going into the university. So I've done a few kind of presentations on my career, and that's always been to the universities. But it's a great point you mentioned. We need to go probably before that, right? A step before, into the secondary schools and explain to them everything about our industry, and mention it's not just for people that are maybe extroverts or creative. There is space for people that are more analytical, data-led as well. So yeah, I think that's a great point. In terms of hiring for GroupM, for example, over the years, how's that changed? Have the profiles that we've been hiring changed over the years, or is the same person that's applying for a job 20 years ago, do they look the same now?
So I think probably, like I said, very few people have the opportunity that I had in terms of, turning up in a cab and having a chat and getting that. So I'm very grateful that I got that opportunity. I think what we have become is, and for that reason that I mentioned in terms of our job is about representation of the UK population, is we've become more considered in how we hire. We understand that we are not looking at the pool of talent that sits in front of us, perhaps, or the people that we know, or someone's son or daughter that we know. We're much more considered in it. I think also had kind of, in terms of attraction, right? We live in a digital first world. Candidates are now able to build a picture of us as a business and how we operate as an employer before they've even considered applying for a role. So people are becoming much more selective in choosing employers that represent their values, who they can see are doing purposeful work, are in line with, increasingly we get lots of questions about what we're doing in sustainability. And, having that freedom of choice, it means that we need to be really clear as organisations in terms of what we stand for and what we offer employees, and kind of how we as a company are trying to make a difference in the world, and how we hope that they as employees can make a difference.
Yeah. And how has flexible working affected all of this? Because I can think of, I entered the industry about 12, 13 years ago. For me to say to my manager, oh, I'm just working from home, Thursday and Friday this week. Yeah, it just wouldn't happen. I think the whole cultural shift. There's been a massive cultural shift in that sense, right? Where it's,
Yeah.
I suppose, a little bit expected now to have a few days working from home in each organization. So yeah, I think it'd be interesting to understand how you've seen that develop as well, especially in the last couple of years.
No, I think the past 3 years has made us all really rethink what we want from life, but in this case, from work, and it's kind of enabled us, like I say, to make certain choices based on whether that employer enables us to have that balance in our life. I think as an employer, it's enabled us to think about the talent we hire and where we hire them from. I live in Brighton. Commuting pre-pandemic 5 days a week was miserable. Commuting 3 days a week is great because I still get that balance of the creative element of the office, the energy that I get from working with people, whilst also kind of creating that space to do the kind of individual work that needs to get done. Generally people want more choice. They want that new balance. And what's really important when we are asking people to come in and work from the office, here we're working 3 days in, 2 days at home. And actually those 3 days can be in clients' offices, they can be at conferences, it's not necessarily at a desk. But what's really important is that we're thinking about how people are spending their time. Are they doing it wisely? Is it for collaboration? And is it a positive one? There really has to be purpose, a clear purpose of coming into the office. And for me, that's about, in part, how we collaborate in creating things, in creativity. But also, there is something about being in office that it kind of helps you in your career, right? I've learned so much through osmosis. I was really lucky to sit next to an amazing strategist in my first job at MediaCom, and he's a super brain. He's so smart. And I just sat next to him, and we didn't even really work together that much, but I learned so much from being near him. And that is the beauty of being in the office. So, the whole creativity that it gives you kind of doing that in office and that time spent for you to really kind of concentrate and have that thinking time when you're at home, I think it's really important.
Yeah. And it's definitely a balancing act, right? So it's, seeing if you can work from home, if you can't, it probably depends on the role as well. Some are more client focused, whereas a lot of them are kind of back end, maybe data tech related, ops related. But how do we measure this output? So you mentioned, you've got a few days a week, people come in at GroupM, and you're trying to ensure that they're productive and there is output. But how do you measure that? Is it through a survey? Is it through kind of conversations with managers? How do you measure that?
What's really important, because I think we're at the beginning of a journey, right, with this. We and other companies are really only starting to put in place kind of a level of expectation right now. So I think for us, the way we will measure it is like constant feedback. We need that constant feedback from our manager level, but also feedback from the teams, right? Like I said, we want to make this a really positive experience for people in the office. We need to hear from them. Is the space working for them? Are they able to actually do their work? So that constant feedback from all levels, I think, is really important. And will it be completely smooth from day one? Probably not. But I foresee a time when this becomes a preferable way to work for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And do you think we'll never go back to that 5-day commute into London, rat race type work? Do you think that will ever go back to that?
I really don't, because I think people now also equally see the benefit of having that time working from home, getting your head down without distractions, without kind of the natural chat that comes from being in the office. we know that there are positives of that way of working as well. Whereas I think it was a bit, probably pre-pandemic, a bit frowned upon, right? Sort of almost felt a bit like, oh, I'm going to work from home for the day, but don't worry, I'll be online, it's fine.
Yeah.
We know that it works because we did many years of it. We know that the kind of hybrid model works. So I don't think we will go back to it, and I don't think anybody wants to go back to it. And I think if we were going back to a 5-day week, I think in office, I think it would be really difficult for employers to hire talent into those roles.
Definitely. And I think it's also important to highlight that there probably shouldn't be a blanket approach, right? So an individual in their certain circumstances might want to come in 3, 4, 5 days a week, whereas you've got some people that, I don't know, whether they have young children, so they've got obligations of pickups, drop-offs, etc. I'm just speaking for myself, really. So it's great to kind of work from home in that sense. So I'm guessing that blanket approach is probably not suitable as well.
And you have to, I mean, even the flexibility of the days that you're in the office as well. So we have like flexi hours here because you know that, the days of like, oh God, I've got to pick the kids up from nursery and that stress that comes with it. If we can take away that stress and you work slightly different hours, it's so much more beneficial for kind of productivity and well-being.
You mentioned flexible working is important when it comes to retaining talent, but are there any other tools out there for companies that you feel that they could use to ensure that their talent is staying within the company? Because historically we're an industry where people do jump jobs quite a bit, especially in certain fields, whether it's programmatic, whether it's media buyers, planners within agencies. But yeah, what can organizations do to retain their talent in addition to having flexible working?
I think it is, for me, it's about culture, right? And I think it's about making sure that we have a culture in place that is thinking about the individual needs of our teams, that allows them to kind of bring their whole selves to work and gives them that opportunity to be really creative in the space that they're in. And of course, there are all of those other sort of benefits that come that you still expect that come with a role. But sort of going back to the point that I mentioned before around purpose, people want a reason to turn up to work. They want to believe in what their company are doing. So having that built into your culture, I think, is really important.
I think in the past, culture probably meant a big Christmas party at the end of the year, for mainly bad reasons, good and bad reasons. A lot of the cultural side of it in our industry was very, it was keeping up appearances, ensuring, managers are happy. Maybe, it's a sensitive topic, but a lot of alcohol was involved, and I've definitely seen in the last 4 or 5 years that changing and that shift. So when you are speaking to clients and agencies, whether you're going out for lunches or you're meeting up kind of after work, it's more around activities. So having a football match, playing badminton, it's less so kind of going to the pub and having a drink. So have you seen that on your side as well change?
Absolutely. I think interactions now are just much more thoughtful, actually, and purposeful. I don't think, anybody's sort of spending absolutely shed loads of money on, to your point, these kind of massive alcohol-fueled parties, or even things like activities that would have traditionally been quite exclusive, like golf days, which historically have been for senior men, where they were making decisions, they were building those relationships. There's even been a kind of a pullback from that as well. And we are really conscious when we do things either with clients or things that we sponsor or things that we partake in, that we are keeping in mind inclusion actually in those activities.
Mm-hmm. And is that where you feel we have been better at that now? So attracting a more diverse pool of talent, because 15, 20 years ago it would have been exactly that profile. We talked about, having the sociable element, the people that would like a drink and then be going to the pub, and that's where the deals were being done. And maybe that alienated some cultural backgrounds, certain communities and upbringings. So would you say now we're at a much better place than we were back then in
Yeah, absolutely.
attracting that diverse talent?
Absolutely, absolutely. And, it's not just a tick box.
Mm-hmm.
Diversity of talent literally makes work better. It makes it more creative, more innovative, more effective. It makes
Have you got any examples of that where you have seen a diverse team within your experience pulling together and having great outcomes or any great results?
So, brilliant examples of where diverse teams have kind of come together and it shows up in the work. We had one of our clients is Tesco, and they did a wonderful campaign around Ramadan.
I've seen that actually a few times on TV as well as my phone, and I don't go through the fasting period, but it's definitely great to see, and it's very inclusive, right? Sorry, I kind of jumped in there, but
No,
it's something that's front of mind for sure for me, and I've seen it on different channels.
absolutely. And it just makes sense, right? I mean, having that shift of when the creative is showing in relation to where that kind of, particularly the out of home, I'm a big lover of out of home, is kind of based. That happens because you've got diverse teams. Right, that is because you have insight, and also in part because you think about inclusion from the very start. From who you have in the room coming up with the ideas, through how you factor in, in your inclusive planning, through to execution, to where it shows up. And I think that case study from Tesco and the Essex MediaCom team was a brilliant one.
Yeah, it's a great example, great campaign. Really enjoyed the ads. It's been really good. We've talked about talent, retaining talent, and definitely, the different tools that an organization can use. But kind of like in terms of growth within the industry and building leaders, how would you say we're doing that? And now especially in the digital side of things, you think the leaders now in the digital space probably looked very different to advertising in general before digitalization, right? And everyone's been kind of growing with the industry. But yeah, how do we make those leaders, and how do we keep those leaders within our organizations?
So for me, kind of leaders is always an interesting one, because I think it's how you define leadership, right? And whether we're talking about leaders as in people who are leading their practice and their discipline, or whether we're talking about leaders of people, because, being a manager isn't necessarily the indicator of success for everybody. And I've met, particularly, when I was in sales world, brilliant ICs who are phenomenal what they do. They are phenomenal at bringing people together in a campaign, in a piece of work, but they choose not to manage people. So there's a bit of me that goes, I really want us to celebrate those people as leaders as well. But if we're talking specifically around kind of leaders in the sense of people, I think it's making sure that they are empowered to make decisions, that there is a place for particularly that talent. And digital is a really interesting place for this, because there is probably a broader talent pool, if you like. So we are seeing a lot of female leaders in this area. A lot of our digital businesses are run by women here at GroupM. But what's really important is that they've seen good leadership, right? And when you have to have seen what good looks like, and you have to see people like you in those leadership roles. Kind of going back to the industry, I think some of the very best leaders I've ever worked for is the ones who have enormous imagination and can kind of see the world in a different way, and they have an ambition that they want to achieve and they think we ought to achieve, and they bring people along with that journey, giving people a reason to believe and a reason to belong and stay. I think wanting to be a leader is good, but you have to kind of, to be a really good leader, believe in what you're doing first and foremost. So that's when I'm kind of looking at leaders, that's what I look for, those inspiring characters, and I've certainly worked for a lot of them, which I've been very lucky to do. But yeah, I think what's really important for us as a business, as businesses, is that we look at the talent coming through. We don't just focus on who do we bring in at a senior level, but who are we mentoring and sponsoring in their careers that are coming through our business. And there's a huge amount of talent to make sure that they're the leaders of tomorrow. Like, I think that's a really important focus.
And you touched on mentoring there. How important is mentoring and coaching of the leader, as well as the output that they're giving back to the company or the industry? How important is that?
I think it's really important. I was very lucky a couple of years ago. I'm part of a network called Bloom, which is a network for women in kind of the advertising industry. A key part of what we do as Bloom is mentoring program. And I was lucky enough to run that a few years ago. And we very much put as much in the training of the mentors as we do the mentees. So it's not just about what do you kind of want to get out of this relationship, what do you want to get out of your time with your mentor, but it's also about training the mentor to be as good as they can be in that relationship. So I don't think you can just throw someone into it and expect them to be a good mentor. I think both parts are really important. I also think co-mentoring is quite interesting. So one of the other things that we did in the program was a co-mentoring sessions between senior male leaders and senior female leaders, and they would obviously mentor one another, because I think what that enabled us to do is to get different perspectives, actually. And I know my time where I was doing that co-mentoring relationship was really, really useful for me. And it's something that we've got in our business as well, mentorship programs across the agencies and within GroupM, because we know that it's a really key role, actually, in someone's career. And you need to have those people to encourage you, guide you, and sometimes just be a person that is separate from your boss, your day-to-day, somebody that you can kind of just talk openly with.
And did you see were there any differences between what a male would give in terms of advice versus female? Did he go that granular, or did you see that actually is quite similar?
Do you know what? I think we didn't go as granular as measuring it to were you kind of getting the same types of advice from men and women. I actually think in the exchange program, which is the male-female program, I think we all probably just were a bit more enlightened about the experiences that people had, because you just never lived that experience. So, I know for me, I worked with, I went through it 3 times, 3 really brilliant individuals who came from a very different background to me in terms of their skill set and their kind of work background. And it just gave me a new perspective. But mentoring generally, I think, because you are talking to different people outside of your team bubble, or, occasionally outside of your work bubble, you should get those kind of light bulb moments of, this is how it relates.
Definitely. If you were to give any advice to someone entering the industry or re-entering the industry, is there any organizations or any platforms or anyone in particular you think they should speak to? If that's what they're interested in.
So I think looking for programs. So if you're entering the industry, looking for programs like the Digital Academy are really interesting because they give you a taster of what the industry is before you kind of commit to being part of it. You know, they're relatively short courses to take in. I didn't realise, I don't think, until actually I left my kind of bubble of Mediacom, having been there and then being my family, how important networking was. So actually, those opportunities to find networks of people who kind of inspire you or that you can learn from are really, really important. And there's lots of them in the industry now. There's MEFA, there's Bloom, there's Wackle. There's lots of places you can go to learn and to hear from people that are like you, that you're inspired by, that want to pay it forward. So I would absolutely say to anyone, like, networking and finding those people is really important. There's NABs as well, of course. They run significant training programs. You know, we were talking earlier about kind of the entertainment side, right? I think in the absence of, you know, if you look my you know, long career anyway, you made some really good friends. As terrible as, you know, alcohol fueled or what have you, those kind of things were. When you're young and you're in the office and you're spending all that time together, you really make friends, and you know, they're friends for life in many cases. In a world where we're doing less of that, where can you make and meet those people who will be your cheerleaders and allies moving forward? And I think that it's still in part work, but as we're doing that less, as we're spending slightly less time together, finding those other areas of connection is really important.
Definitely. We always finish off our episodes with this question, so it'd be great to get your take on it. If you had a superpower in AdTech, what would it be?
So I did think about this one because I was bouncing back and forward, but I finally nailed it. So a few weekends ago, I was at my parents' house, and my mum is finally, after 25 years of us not living there, clearing out all the things that she's collated of mine and my siblings from the spare room. And she asked us to go through it and sort of decide whether we actually wanted to keep it or we didn't want to keep it. And obviously in there are some school reports. And one of my teachers had commented on me being restlessly curious. I think she probably meant nosy. But if I'm going to look at it in a positive light, I think it's because I'm always trying to understand the things that I don't understand, which is a great deal. You know, I think we all, at wherever we are in our journey, there's always so much more that we can learn. But, you know, it's in my nature to kind of dig a bit deeper and ask those questions and try and understand. And restlessly curious actually is probably quite a nice way to put it. But because of that, I think if I had a superpower in technology, I would probably choose something around data, right? In a parallel life, I'd love to have a job where I was the one kind of understanding the data, looking for the insights, seeing the kind of the human part of that and marrying that with the creativity that's required to apply it effectively within advertising. So, yeah, I think it would be definitely in the data space.
Amazing. Thank you for that. I think that's all we've got time for in today's episode. Thanks, Katie, for your time.
No, thank you very much for having me.